Owain Yeoman and Tim Kang aren't real cops, but they're
TV police!
the TV police.
Jimmy Gadd!
Jimmy Gadd!
Hey, guys.
What a pleasure to have you, sir, Jimmy Gadd, our editor extraordinaire with us. Jimmy
you, sir.
is someone who is a huge part of the Mentalist family, and not someone who knows it inside and out just from watching it, but someone who knows it inside and out from shaping it.
And look at that shirt.
Let's
Tim's
just take a
paid me
moment to
lot.
appreciate that shirt.
Yeah.
That's right. You got to represent. I mean, look in the background. I've got my Mentalist poster. There's
There we
Simon.
go.
Oh,
I have a little treat. If you look over there, that's the original poster.
There it
That
is.
was from the pilot.
what Jimmy hasn't mentioned is that this is a shrine that is there all the time, right, Jimmy? You didn't just put that in specially for us. You
Well,
go to
that's usually
sleep every
in the
night.
bed. I wrap up in it, you know.
Staring at-
Yeah. I wear this shirt every night, and it's
Yes.
I mean, it's been on
It's doing
since
all right.
2008. It must be
That's
a little fragrant now, but it's such a pleasure to have you, Jimmy. We've really loved doing this as the TV Police because it's not just been a chance for us to go back and rediscover the show, but it's also been a wonderful opportunity to reconnect with family members. Before we get into the episode, I'd love for you to give just a little bit of background on yourself, how you came to the Mentalist, and from an editor's point of view, what that journey looked like.
Okay, how can I truncate this story? So I was a child actor.
You don't need to
I was one of
truncate it
the-
at all. We can
Okay,
do what you
all right.
do later
You can
on.
do- oh, you
yeah.
can just
Give it-
clip
give
it.
Just
it-
not
give it
not as
all.
good. Yeah.
No,
Just not
quite
as well.
good,
We'll do what you do, just not as
Yeah.
well.
So I was child actor, one of the original Oscar Mayer Wiener kids, and my mom and dad, they were actors as well. My dad is tall like I am, and like you, Owen. That sometimes
We all
taller
knew.
actors.
We all knew you weren't talking to me. That's
Listen, Tim, I
you
wasn't
didn't
gonna
need to
pass
clarify.
this, okay? But sometimes the taller actors, you don't have as many opportunities. And so my dad
Mhm.
got a Robert Redford movie, and he got cast as the best friend. And when he showed up on set, he was slightly better looking and slightly taller. And they just said that, I'm sorry, you can't be in this movie. And so my dad luckily
that's
was
so
in the
funny.
science side of things. He became a doctor. And then my mom continued acting, got me into acting. Then she thought, I don't want him to be in acting forever. So she pulled out. She became an archaeologist and anthropologist. And I grew up in Arizona. So when it's 120 degrees in the
Yeah.
summer, my mom was like, we're going to go on holiday and we're going to start shooting stuff. And so she handed me a camera at 12 and I started shooting documentaries. And I had no idea what I was doing, but I learned on the fly. I was just shooting, and then we get home and it's like, you got to learn to edit this. And then, at the time there weren't a lot of editing systems. And so we did tape to tape editing. My grandfather gave an Apple Macintosh with the latest and greatest, which was either
Yeah.
Avid or Media 100. And so we went with Media 100. And I would go to Las Vegas to the NAB show, National Association of Broadcasters, and I'd see all the things. And I kind of thought, oh, this is what my family does. I never thought of it as work. I was really good with computers. I thought when I get to university, I'm going to just jump right into computers. That's my future. And I thought, this sucks. I want to do what my family does. And somebody said, well, documentary filming is filmmaking, right? I still had a great 2-year film school. I started there. And then our family friends, they were in the business. I don't know if you know the Bobby Ball Talent Agency. Their family has been very culturing with ours. And they brought me out to work on the movie Ali with Will Smith. And so that was
Wow.
in 2001. And that kind of launched my career. I've always
What
wanted
were
to be
you?
a
What
director.
did you do? What did you do on Ollie?
So on Ali, I was originally just going to be a PA,
Okay.
a production assistant. You can't come out and be a PA for a month. I was just going to do it during the
Right.
summer, go back and finish school. And then everyone's like, what are you going back to finish school for? You're on Ali with Michael
Yeah.
Mann and with Will Smith.
Uh-huh.
What are you doing? I still just wanted to get my education. I wasn't ready to move yet. So I luckily got to became very good friends with Muhammad Ali, and then his best
Wow.
friend, Howard Bingham, became a mentor to me. He was an executive producer on the film, but also Howard Bingham was Muhammad Ali's personal photographer. And because of that, he kind of protected me. I got in as an intern, and I thought that's going to be miserable. I don't want to be an intern, but it actually saved me. Michael Mann was running a 24-hour cutting room, 16 assistant editors, 4 editors, and you had the Avid side and the film side. And so they were overwhelmed, and I was eager. And I
You
also
jumped
knew
in.
computers. And I jumped in, and they needed computer help. I could fix their computers, put in memory. I could do all that stuff. And so I made myself invaluable. And because of
I
that,
love that.
they folded me into the film side, taught me everything. I had millions of feet of film in my hands that I was going through organizing.
Yes,
I mean,
right.
all this stuff. And then I finally got to talk to Michael Mann, and he said, to be a good director, you need to be an editor, because every project is made in post-production. You know, like the Mentalist, we shoot an episode for 8 days, but then we take a month to basically shape it, and then boom, out the door. Feature films, as you know, you're doing it over 30 plus days, and then I just finished Chris Long's. Well, we're almost finished with Chris Long's
So
movie.
I was wrong. So I was wrong in my assessment earlier in an earlier episode. Me and Owen were talking about it, and I said, there's a few days before the episode starts for pre-production, and like 2 or 3 days for post-production.
We were such actors. We were like, yeah, it's probably a couple of days afterwards where they just snap it together. No,
it's a month to get that episode out. Yeah,
to do the full process.
Thank you for the clarification. Yes.
Yeah, you're welcome.
2 days of editing the cast, and then 3.5 weeks of editing Tim, and then finally the episode's ready, right? Yeah.
Try to edit out as much of Owen as possible, and
exactly.
Edit in
I believe it.
Of Amanda Rigetti, and then you're good. So
100%.
I believe it. Rules to live by for sure.
I'm just finishing up Chris Long's feature film, and he started shooting that last October, and here we are in October. Wow. So a year later, feature films, it takes almost a year to shape your story. Because they always say there's the one you write, the one you produce, and the one you edit. And, they can all look different, because on paper, you see it's like a big party scene. And then you actually get there and you don't have enough money, or you have too much money in your party scene. And so now you're refocusing in it. And then you put it on the big screen, you're like, it's not playing. And then, do we cut it off? Do we make it a flashback? Do we do this with it? How integral is it to the story? So
how did all that, especially from Ollie, lead ultimately to The Mentalist?
Oh, you want me to shorten the story? You said I could just.
No.
So 1978, I was born, and then to begin at the beginning. What I'm fascinated about is, so you've got this broad interest in entertainment and possibly filmmaking. You've got the skill set of computers. Had editing been something that you were actively considering at that point? Because I don't imagine that's the first place your mind goes, I want to be an editor. Or maybe you did. Maybe I'm wrong.
You were instructed that you have to learn how to edit first, right?
Sure.
Michael Mann, that's the advice that he gave you, right?
Yeah.
And is that what brought you to The Mentalist? Is here's an editing opportunity?
Going back to Bobby Ball, her daughter Lori Ball is an editor, and she was editing the feature film right after Ollie, and she said, I want you to become my assistant editor. That started my trajectory in learning what a movie is, what a production is, how you're getting the movie across the board. And then I went back to film school to CSUN, and I thought, I have a degree in editing, I have a degree in acting and directing, but no one likes a jack of all trades. So I had to really focus. So my goal was director and find a show to get onto. And so I was editing on Mike White, who did The White Lotus. His feature film Across the Hall was a TV series. And that was Dirt with Courtney Cox. And that was our first big show after Friends. And Chris Long was the producer director on that series. So I worked on that series for 2 seasons before we got canceled by the writer's strike. And luckily, because it got canceled, that entire crew moved over to The Mentalist. And I kind of filtered through there. I had only focused on features, walked across the hall to get into television. And then from there, I hit an amazing series. I mean, I didn't know what series were. I always wanted to be a feature guy. And then I realized, especially in early 2000s, television has just been so great and amazing. It's not just these sitcoms, and casting no shade on sitcoms, but my goodness, like so much drama and amazing actors.
I think
and there's always been that weird divide.
You hit on the, television was really in its golden age in the noughties, wasn't it? From the acting side, certainly there was, when I came into the business and I moved to LA in 2003, there was still a bit of a snobbery of, oh, well, if you're doing TV, then it's because you didn't make it as a film star. Whereas I made a very conscious effort to try and get into television because I thought, well, here's a gig that could be as close to a 9 to 5. It can be consistent. I can be next to my family. And, as you get a little older as well, the traveling gypsy thing of being an actor has less and less appeal. It gets a little old.
And what a home run, Jimmy. I mean,
straight on to... Is it your longest running show, Jimmy, to date?
Yes, yeah, it's my longest running show, and unfortunately, it will probably be all of our longest running shows
right.
ever because
Because
TV
we
has
don't-
changed
certainly.
so much.
We don't do
Almost
that
certainly.
anymore.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, almost certainly.
yeah.
It's fascinating to have someone who has such an intricate knowledge of this show because
It's so
you know,
good. I'm just riveted right now listening.
Sure.
talk to us just very quickly about what the cadence of an edit for a television show looks like. So we've shot the show, and that's usually 7 or 8 days. But what does it look like to you, Jimmy, then when it gets handed to you in post?
That edit starts off on day one, right? The first day you get the footage and you start shaping it immediately, right?
Usually the next day. So you have
Just the
one
day
full day
after.
they process overnight, and then I get the
Sure.
next
Well,
day. So
right.
when you guys are shooting day two, I'm
It's,
getting
it's
day
fairly,
one.
yeah.
So, and that process usually is, we get the scripts early on. We're reading through it. We'll usually do a tone meeting. So we'll sit down with, Bruno and the rest of the writers of that episode. And so you're sitting down, you're reading through, just giving some tone notes, and then we'll figure out where you're going to shoot. Usually, you'd always start your first day on on the Warner Brothers lot. So that was great for me because I, wanting to be a director, as you're shooting day one, I'd go down to set, and because I didn't have any dailies yet, that way I could start seeing what you guys were doing because that would inform me for the edit. So I could see the locations, understand. I'd sit next to Cheryl, all the time, and Dan Church would throw some cans on me, and I'd get my own share, and it was amazing. It was really that goes back to the family thing. So I'd sit down, I'd watch that whole day, and that helped me hear Chris Long or whoever's notes and what notes were they giving the actor, and what questions from the actors come up in the story, because then that also informs my edit because I'm hearing we're gonna have trouble with this moment, so maybe I got to focus a little more on this. So then day two, morning comes in. We're loading in all those dailies. You usually have maybe, let's say, 4+ hours worth of material. I load all that in. You're organizing it by the scene. You're also getting Cheryl Starbucks line script pages, and that line script
Cheryl was
page would
our
show me
continuity editor, continuity supervisor. Yeah.
Yes,
Wonderful.
and my right hand woman. I mean, without
I'm
Cheryl,
interested to hear about
editor,
that. Yeah.
yeah, without Cheryl, you don't
absolutely.
know what was shot, if that scene is complete, because sometimes the scene wouldn't be complete, and
Right.
you don't
Just a
know what that
jumble.
all looks
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all of that
She's the
helps.
roadmap. Yeah.
She is the roadmap. And then I figured out from one of our other editors, David Ekstrom, the way he organizes his stuff, because at the end of the day, you're looking at basically an hour TV show that we're truncating down to 45 minutes. And I've got to
Sure.
remember which ones was this. And I can't be flipping through pages. And especially, at the end when I've got Chris Long and everybody else in the room, why did you use this one? And what is this reason? So I had to build my own memory. So
The process is usually that you shape an edit first, and then the director would have veto on that.
So we're shooting an episode for 8 days. I have I have 7 days to basically keep up to camera. That way, if there's any
Sure.
problems, then I know it's been edited. And then I'm editing my version. It's the editor's cut. And then they usually would give me 2 to 3 days after you were finished, shooting, for me to finish up that edit. And that also meant putting it all together, putting in all the sound effects, and then putting in all of like Neely's music. And you're shaping the whole episode almost like a finished episode, so you can tell, is it working? What's not working? And I would send that off to the director. The director would usually watch the edit at home, and then they would send in some notes. Then I would quickly jump in on those notes, and the director would have 4 days to do their director's cut. So I would
Right.
jump in, do those notes. And so then the next day when the director came in and sat in my office, they had already had, a huge amount of notes done to what their vision was. And then we'd just sit there and we'd work on moments. Is this
Right.
working? Is this not working? That director's cut would go to the producers, and then Chris Long would come in. After Chris was done with it, then we'd present it to Bruno and the writers. And then usually
Right.
you'd have all the writers would give their notes on it, but then Bruno and Chris would sit down and cherry pick which ones were the best notes to get the episode into the best shape possible. I was really only focused on one episode, and just as I was finishing one episode, we start shooting the next. So I'd just be finishing one just as the next one started. So you'd
Right.
rarely have a day off in between, but your days are always the heaviest when you're in dailies after you guys
Sure.
are shooting for those 8 days. And then after that, it does soften up because you're waiting on producers or the studio, for instance.
Did you guys sort of have alignment quite often? Was there any sort of moments where you're like, you know what? I'm going to die on the hill of this moment. I believe it's this moment. And maybe a certain director said, actually, that's not the moment for me.
I'm a people pleaser. at the end of the day anyway. So I was always appeasing. And to me, there was no hill to die on because I didn't write it. It was a gift for me to have a job on a huge show. And so early on, no, I didn't want to do any
That's
of
got to
those
be a
things.
huge
And I also,
advantage as an editor to like you don't have an ego, you know, to kind of hinder your work, right?
I think so. And also, the show goes smoother if I can hear what Chris and Bruno want at the end of the day. And if I
Right.
know what every episode looks like, he'd want to put awesome poppy music in it. That's not our show. We have
Right.
Blake giving us a beautiful score, but we'd never put in a Rihanna song. A couple times I cut in Rihanna songs, but then you got to strip it out. Make it The Mentalist because that's all they want to watch is The Mentalist, and that's my job is to make it look like The Mentalist, and then you can see what the real problems are.
When did it become The Mentalist?
Mm.
What you just said. When did we know? Strip out the Rihanna. That's not The Mentalist. This is The Mentalist. When did that happen? End of season 1? Because me and Owen were talking about the funk meter being like through the roof on the last episode, and I'm
Blake
pretty
Neely
sure
was really slapping the bass.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was like one of the only times we turned the funk meter up. I don't remember it coming back. When did we know from your vantage point?
It was interesting because the first episode I did was Chris Long's first episode. The first notes from the studio were, it looks too much like a movie. His first episode, The Mentalist, looked too much like a movie, which you'd think would be a compliment. But, we had to listen to the studio. And I remember our producer, Charlie, coming in and he thought, we're going to fail. We only have an A story. That first season or two, we only did A stories.
Right.
It wasn't until future episodes that you had the B story with, you and Van Pelt and Cho's side story.
I'm sure when you look back now as a veteran editor of many, many years and many, many projects, do you sort of see a certain editorial style that belonged to a time?
Because I was so new and I wasn't really focused on the editing, and I have to give all the credit to Chris Sabelli, who was actually the editor of this episode, because I was his assistant early on. But, you're hearing the guidance. It actually is very funny. It's a quick side story. When Chris Sabelli would watch an episode, you'd have the funny moments in there and he'd laugh, and I'd be in the room because it's the first time we're watching it. So you're laughing. But after the 20th time you're watching it, it's not funny anymore. But he would keep laughing, and I'd look over at him. I'm like, is this guy crazy? It's not funny anymore. But I realized we are the audience as the editor, because as soon as the writer or Chris Long or anybody would walk in the room, if we don't laugh at that moment, now they're concerned about their writing. Is it no longer funny?
That's right.
And so I have to play that audience constantly. So I learned to be an audience member. I think the biggest difference between TV, especially in 2008, and movies is the editing. So I'll give you a quick example. So in TV, especially The Mentalist, I would do what I consider the 50-50 edit. So if it's a scene with both you and Tim, and, you're both talking, anytime somebody talks, you cut to them, so a 50-50, you're giving it there. But in a movie, if you're talking and, do I stay on you? And am I just focused on you only, or do I cut to Tim listening? What's more important in that moment? Is it Tim's character absorbing that, and just realizing like what a he is,
Yes, pop to Tim, but pop to Tim briefly,
just briefly. Just from side conversations, Chris and Bruno had a shorthand, and Chris said, if you want me to do well in production, you have to do well in the writing and make sure we have the scripts on time. So just from that standpoint, that the scripts were ready and had it to that point. And then they trusted, we have some amazing writers on the show. So they trusted the writers, because they're storytellers, to watch it. And everybody has a good idea. It doesn't mean that's the right idea for the show. But, if you're going to take your time to watch it, put your notes down, and then they would always consider them. Sometimes it would be the same note. If you had the same note 20 times, maybe we have to look at this. But if it's a left field note, they're not going to do that, because we don't have 2 months to do the show. At that point, we have like a week and a half. So it's just look at all those notes, quickly do the best version. And then at the end of the day, it's Bruno's show, and it's his job as a showrunner to just make the best episode. And whether that's cutting out a scene, or we had to get it down to 42:30 was our running time. So when you're getting down exactly to 42:30 and commercials and all of that, and you're trying to stick to that, not every episode you're going to shoot exactly to 42:30. And most of my episodes would come in around 45. And that also was my job as the editor. I could have made the edits longer and I could have had a 1-hour episode, but that does nobody any good. So let's try to get it down to about 45. Bruno knew what the show was. So he would just look at those notes and again, if it was good. Otherwise, it was his show. So yeah, I mean, never got diluted in my mind.
Okay. I think it's amazing to have, and there's been a few conversations that we've had about the foresight that Bruno has had. He maintains that he knew that Sheriff McAllister was Red John from very early on. I'm not sure if that is true, but if so,
what have you heard, Jimmy, about that?
I actually hadn't heard anything. The only big things I had heard early on was that, Robin Tunney and Simon were never going to be a love interest, because they were brother and sister, and Bruno was never going to push that. And I think there was a certain point, maybe in season 4, where he's like, maybe I have to drive it that way. Outside of that, we didn't even know. I even worked on the episode where they had all the Red Johns, later on, and what's that, season 5 or 6? And, it was very good at hiding it. And I think that's what was nice is we, as the editors and inside the show, didn't know. And there'd always speculation. But I also think that Bruno was smart enough to listen to see who we thought it was, because that was another way that when they got to those next episodes, they could write that a little bit edgier.
Well, what you're describing is my main remembrance of Bruno. He was always a man of very measured words. And, what I loved about him was that he was a great listener. And nowhere is that more evident in the fact that we would go and have small conversations, little character discussions. And the fact that you've now identified that he's inviting all of this critique from the other writers, but also ultimately has that veto. I just wanted to take a little moment before we do our one-word remembrance to draw some attention to this. Here we are, because I've been trying to hide it, but so I want to just give a really now. This is Tim and I. We're fairly modest folk. Well, Tim is at least, and we don't like to toot our own horn, but the opening month of the TV Police has just been breathtaking for us. We knew that there was a community out there for The Mentalist, and we knew that the fandom was very, very much alive and kicking. I will say this. Over the last month, we have already, and it's not even at a full month, had 45,000 streams, which is just breathtaking. I am just thrilled. And on behalf of myself and Tim and the TV Police, thank you so much.
Everyone.
We featured in the TV and film section, podcast section, and we were number 2 in Uzbekistan and number 1 in Guatemala.
Yeah.
I will hasten to add to this. 20 top 20 placements, including Japan, New Zealand, Germany, France, Poland, Lithuania. It's very humbling and really remarkable. And thank you for being here.
You've been sitting there for 20 minutes with 2 shirts on.
And I've got the little TV Police logo on here. And then, so you can imagine how thrilled I was when Jimmy wore his Mentalist t-shirt. And now,
it's perfect.
Now we look like a rogues gallery where you've let us down.
Perfect.
Do you know what I mean? Mentalist, number 1 in Guatemala, nothing.
Yeah. Can I add one? Can I add one thing about our fans? I feel so lucky. Our fans are so great, and I would live stream a lot of the episodes because I had all that behind the scenes on Twitter back in the day. And some of the best fans, I've had the pleasure of meeting them, and they've given me amazing gifts. They've just been amazing. And remember, season 1. I just took this yesterday. It's hard to see over the camera, but that is me and Chris Long with our People's Choice Award.
Hey,
right. That was just yesterday. I went over to Chris's house yesterday, and Bruno had just given that to him. We have amazing fans.
Yeah,
we do. I amen to that. So let's dive into episode 7, season 1, episode 7, Seeing Red. Tim, would you like to do today's little summary? I know you're a fan of the summary.
Always. Season 1, episode 7, Seeing Red, directed by Martha Mitchell, written by Gary Glassberg. Wealthy heiress Rosemary Tennant is killed in a hit and run, predicted by her psychic, Christina Fry. As the CBI team investigate, Jane's list of suspects come to include Christina, her son Travis, whom she recently wrote out of her will, and her in-house photographer/lover Jeremy Hale, who was recently written into the will.
Thank you, Mentalist Wiki, for that excellent summary.
That was me from memory.
That was from memory?
From memory, yeah.
It's amazing how you always kind of look at the table as if you're reading when you're recalling things.
That's how I recall. That's my recall
I can see your recall is powerful. Yeah. It's sort of, but it needs to be locked in. What an interesting episode. And I thought one that really, really dialed in so many of the themes of the show. I thought they were really front and center. Psychics versus non-believers. The Christina Fry character is someone I want to talk about at length because Leslie is a fantastic actress, and it's for me a great way of coming straight into my one word. So I will kick us off with the one word, and my word is. Can you see that? Match.
So Owen's
my
word is match.
I also have, I have to say, a second word because it's become a little bit of a word buffet. Every week, Tim bemoaned the fact that I reduced it to one word, and he said I can't do just one word. And I said, come on, it's not that hard. But I have since found that I've needed to do more than one word. So my second word is nausea. Okay, I'll leave those there.
Can you show us one more time, Owen?
Sure.
There
nausea. And it's even written in a slightly nauseating way, like it's sort of like falling off the side of the page or something. So match and nausea, those are my words. Jimmy, what were what's your one word remembrance?
My one word is Ghostbusters.
Ghostbusters, very good.
Yeah, which I think has multiple meanings. So we'll go into that later. So
yes, please.
My one word remembrance for this is versus.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay.
And my second word is
vulnerable.
Vulnerable.
Interesting. Very interesting. Like that. So was this an episode where you were assumedly still in assistant editor mode here, Jimmy, right?
I was, but because, I already had the shorthand from 2 seasons before on the Dirt with Chris Long, I remember those opening scenes. I remember all of that Warner Brothers backlots and Leslie Hope pumping out the door there. And then I was there, where Gilmore Girls used to film, and the car jumps up on the curb to hit her. And I was so interested in the stunt team, them building, they had a little ramp that went up on the side, watching all of that, and seeing the stunt team. And actually, because I was on set, they pulled me to the side and they said, can we replay this? You think this is going to cut together well? And I thought, oh man, like I was nervous. Somebody's asking me for my opinion,
sure.
So it was great. I think, going down memory lane for it. But
the thing that you mentioned earlier about being on set on sort of day one, is that a typical editorial process, or is that something unique to you? It showed that you wanted to be there viscerally and feel it and see it. And is that always something that you continue to do as you worked on other projects?
Yeah, for sure. But that comes from my wanting to direct and wanting to understand the process, So most of the editors I worked with, they never come down to set. For me, it was a necessity to come down to the set. I learned so much that applied to my editing and also just applied to our show. Like you said, we're a family. If I'm off in my own room with the other editors all by myself, I would never know the rest of the family. Unfortunately, you and I didn't really get to connect as much because of my editing thing, but we'd see each other, and then Tim and I became really good friends later in the seasons and when we worked together on several things. But it's because of me being able to go down there and seeing those things that I think is what's really instrumental to being together with the show and showing that I'm there.
Well, I would imagine that there's a rhythm as well to great editing, right? If you can get a personal handle on what our rhythms are, whether it's my rhythm with you, my rhythm with Tim, that must inform and help the work that you do as well, right?
Sure, exactly.
It was a pretty aggressive open, wasn't it? I mean, we've had slightly pedestrian crimes, and the murders, if I'm correct, up to now have only been discoveries. We watched this murder happen in very real time. And I, like you, Jimmy, I'm very nostalgic about Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers is one of my favorite studios to film. Every time I see the backlot, it takes me to a very kind of sentimental place, and I immediately identify it. So like you, I saw all the shops and the car driving up on the curb, and Tim would chastise me here because I'm ruining the movie magic of it all.
And at the beginning of Mentalist, they had the side cold case neighborhood where the writers were in one side, production was in another house that was all the exteriors for the cold case TV show.
We were on those little bungalows.
And Editorial was this little tiny, and forgive my French, a little, side house that was next to the big Warner Brothers kind of lake, which was in this episode where they pulled the car out of. And so, so we were so separated. And it wasn't until season 3 that all the production and editorial was on the bottom floor, and then the writers were above. And I think that's really helped us all too.
So those early on, those buildings that we occupied, they were sets. They were part of the backlot that they just repurposed, threw in a couple desks, and here's your home base.
For the writers, one for the production. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Now, I was always very superstitious as an actor about not filling my trailer with too much personal stuff. If I put too much stuff in here, I'm tempting fate. So what did your office look like? Did you bring in too many personal effects, or did you sort of take the approach of, I want to be lean and mean?
I mean, to be honest, it wasn't until, we moved to the bigger, nicer building over the mill. And when I actually became an editor, that I could actually feel like it was my office. Because when you're an assistant editor, you're sharing offices. They really only, we had 3 assistant editors, and we really only had 2 offices. So you're always kind of rotating, and, right or wrong, probably wrong, I would really kind of sit myself down and say, that's a little bit where my ego came in. I'd say, this is my office. You can share it, but it's still my office. And so I would slowly start putting some of my stuff in there. But then when I finally had my editing office, at one point, even Simon Baker, when he came in, said, "Oh, mate, you got too much in here." Like, I'd had all this movie stuff and movie posters and stuff all over.
I think after a few years, you definitely earned that. Going back to what you were saying, Tim, a couple of episodes ago, another episode that I felt was very loaded, very stacked with talent. We had obviously Christina, Leslie Hope. She brought
She brought it, man. I mean, she
really did. She
was
did.
more
And at the
than
time,
a match for
she was.
Patrick Jane. That was nice to see.
And I think that, just to dive in slightly earlier than we would, obviously that's my word, match. I also felt like Simon and Leslie look kind of similar. So that, if I was to sort of pick maybe the female version of Patrick Jane, that would be it right there. And so it really set up this wonderful opposition. I felt like it was a surprisingly mature episode this early into a season and this early into a series. We're all sort of finding things. The writers were throwing things at the wall. As actors, we're throwing things at the wall. I'm sure you guys are too. What does this look like? What is this show?
Well, what did you, let me interrupt you real quick. What did you hear? Didn't you hear something going back to there was talk of like a love interest potential with Christina Fry?
I felt like they were queuing that up. I don't know if it ever sort of reached full fruition, but it's alluded to even in this episode. There's a bit where she's talking about how she ends up sleeping with the boyfriend, right? Yeah. And she looks at Patrick and she says very directly to him, "Oh, he was a good time." And there's a frisson.
So here's what I heard from the editor. So that's a nice thing about an editing, is that it really ends up being 1 or 2 people in the edit bay, and you're just talking about story. So I think after this performance of hers, they being Chris and Bruno, also were so surprised at how well she did. It's like, this could be a future. She should be somebody that comes back, because they work well. There's a nice chemistry on screen, but also that could be a really good headbutting, but also some sort of love resolution. But at that point, it hadn't really gone into that B story, so I'm not sure what their thinking was, but it was already, I'd heard that, yes, that was going to be something that they should talk about.
And but I'm bringing up that whole story because I thought it was you, Owen, mentioning that Simon didn't want that to happen specifically.
I will say this, that, if that was a decision that had happened creatively, I applaud that, because, we talked about, up until now, the timeline from the death of his family. Yeah. It feels early, and it feels, I don't know what the right time is when you recover from a horrendous tragedy like that. But what I'd found interesting in
season 7 with
right.
Right time.
But I think what's interesting about the Christina Fry character is that it's a very, very strong holding the mirror up to nature for Jane. It's a very uncomfortable projection for
and the
him,
way that Simon calibrates the performance, you can see him squirming. You can see
they were dancing. It was beautiful.
Squirming. It was wonderful.
It was beautiful to see someone who met him eye to eye on his own territory. Yeah. So for me, the match idea and the idea of being able to, this is the first time we see Jane ruffled. And I think that's really, really interesting. Because
I think that goes back to what we had talked about as far as the writers understanding the proper pacing and rhythm already this early on just into 7 episodes. It's already starting to become normalized. So they throw this this curveball at us, somebody that
Yeah.
can go toe to toe. And that pacing and that rhythm is knowing when to pull Jane back. Up until this point, Jane's been steamrolling everyone, including the CBI team. Now, the writers have written in this match, and then obviously towards the end of the episode, he gets taken down a few pegs, and so he's not doing this. He does this, and then we bring him down a few pegs. He does that, and it stays lively. It stays fluid.
Well, for me, what I like too is that Van Pelt's character was given a lot of voice in this episode, where she was taking the lead a lot of time, and then that scene in the kitchen where she really gave it back to Jane. You know, and she was just like, what if there is something more and you just don't want to believe it? And really kind of stopped him in his tracks, you know. And I love starting to see now the rest of the cast starting to evolve and get their own say and kind of start to show that they also have voices.
And it was nice to also see Van Pelt obviously asserting herself, but then also taken in with Christina. I mean, it almost felt like Christina was a big sister to the Van Pelt character, right?
Which is an interesting problem to sort of think about, because when you think about it, like Amanda herself, Van Pelt is a devoutly religious person and has strong faith. You would think in a way that might be diametrically opposed to believing in psychics and clairvoyance, but I guess her justification is it's a continuation of the idea of the afterlife. But I do think that this debate and the fact that the writers at this stage, what you don't want is a character who's so know-it-all that by episode 7 you're like, oh, I'm over him. He's always right. Like the team give him no pushback. And I think that would be a fatal flaw. So now having someone like Leslie come in and be able to provide
knock him down a few pegs,
get under his skin. Maybe it just hits different now as a father. That final moment at the end of the episode, the beauty of that moment is that it's everything that he debunks. You wanted the power to be real because that's the story you wanted to hear. That's the story Jane wants to hear, that his daughter didn't suffer. And it was beautiful, but it still affected him. And that is the beauty. She called it. She called it.
That was exactly what he was thinking. And that leaves that question mark.
I loved seeing Van Pelt being able to unveil more of that sort of faith side of her. But I also loved the continuance of Rigsby and Cho's banter. It had one of my early favorite lines where Cho talks about never really understanding what a zoo was about. And he was like, I've never seen a zebra. That to me is both hilarious and tragic. I almost wanted to take Cho to the LA Zoo and be like, there you go. There's your first zebra. But
well, also, and I know you're keeping count of all the Cho smiles, but this episode also had a half Cho smile. There's like a little bit of a grin.
Yes.
You know.
When was that?
Yes. I forget the exact line. Gosh, I should have written it down.
It was at the end.
When you say to him, you'll never doubt him again?
No, it was at the end when he is saying goodbye to Travis, when Travis thanks.
Oh, that's right. That's
Joe,
right.
And he gives him a little smile. He says, hey, no problem. You bet. And just real quick, just needed to unveil.
Oh, what's happening today on the Quench front? Just Quench?
Just Quench.
Oh, so that's
I backed off of a little bit. Now it's just Quench.
The one thing I did love about this episode was that I felt like we were really treated to a lot of stacked guest talent. Noel, who played Travis, is a fabulous young actor who went on to be fantastic in Shameless. There was also the young lady who played Clara, Ashley. Now, I spent most of the time watching her going, gosh, this girl is so talented. And it bugged me because I couldn't remember where I remembered her from. And I remember thinking, wow, she really looks like the actress from The Last of Us, you know. But then I realized she's not the actress from The Last of Us. She's the actress who played that same role in the game, in the video game. But she's not in the TV show.
No, she is in the TV show.
She is in the TV show?
Yeah, too. No, she is.
What does she play in the TV show?
She has a baby on screen, and that's Ashley Johnson.
That's right. She was amazing because I kept watching it going, why do I know? But correct me if I'm wrong, she was the original lead in the video version of The Last of Us, right? But boy, talk about strength in depth. I mean, Leslie Hope, we've got Noel, we've got Ashley, and then J.R. Bourne, who I have to give an honorable shout out to my buddy J.R. I know you're going to tear me down for this.
I was just going to mention, I remember after the first day of filming, I wasn't there with Owen at that moment. The next day I came in, all I would, JR this and JR that. And my goodness, I worked with JR.
I love that you're so protective and jealous. That's it gives me such faith and love for our bromance. And not just Leslie, but a lot of people matching Patrick Jane's energy. I think the most disarming thing about the Patrick Jane sort of arsenal is his smile. And that obviously comes from Simon. But if there was anyone who could match that sort of twinkle-eyed smile, it was JR. And looking back at it, watching the two of them together, it was like a kind of charm-off. Who was more charming and who was sort of naturally disarming each other?
You see what I mean, Jimmy? Even 20 years later.
Look,
just
he's a great guy,
JR this, JR that.
Listen, I didn't get to encounter JR on this episode, but during the 100 episode party, JR is good friends with Emmanuel Shariki, who was on our show too. And so they both showed up to that 100 episode party together. Yeah. And I knew Emmanuel very well. And so then I got to spend some time with JR too. And I was like, man, this guy's eyes are like electric. Like I started falling into him.
See, I'm not the only one for you.
You can stop.
You know who else is number one in Guatemala? JR Bourne. I've got one of those names that, and a very dear friend of mine very well who probably has a similar problem, Ioan Griffith. It's not a very American name, Owain Yeoman.
I don't know you're friends with Ioan. So Ioan and I are going to co-direct a movie together. And
I know.
I just put his wife in my Winnie the Pooh movie.
In Bianca?
Bianca, yeah. She plays Kanga.
Tell us a little bit about the project that you're working on. Ray of Sunshine, is that right?
Ray of Sunshine, yeah. It's so I met his wife years ago. Actually, said she wanted to start getting into acting, and she had just started doing Baz Luhrmann's movie on Elvis, and so she got kind of pulled in with Baz and with Tom Hanks, and she's going through her MS journey, and with multiple sclerosis, she's had a tough time, and when she was diagnosed. She was married at the time, and her husband had said, "You've ruined our marriage," and really started to be physically angry against her. And so she took her journey and wrote it into Ray of Sunshine. And so I've been culturing her through that. And then when she and Yo got together, he also said, "I'm really wanting to support this project too." And then we just started talking about, okay, let's co-direct it. And he's going to be acting in the project as well. So it just kind of really seemed to work well.
Tell us a little bit about the Winnie the Pooh coming up.
Yes, I want to hear about this, please.
Imminent.
Yes. Super lucky to be able to direct an animated feature. Winnie the Pooh's in public domain, so they asked me to throw a story in the hat. They loved it, and so I wrote it, directed it, produced it basically. I also played the narrator in it and was the editor. So I really put my all into this. And most feature animated movies are done over 2 to 4 years. We did this in 4 months.
So when you said earlier, Jimmy, that no one likes a jack of all trades, you've just gone now and starred in, directed, edited, shot, and made the movie, wrote the movie, narrated the movie.
Yeah.
You're that guy now. Yeah, I see.
Like I said, I have no ego.
Yes, I see.
So when does that come out? What's the and how can we see it? Give us the details on how we can.
Sure. I don't know all the outlets quite yet, but the short answer is it should go out on all the standard streamers on Apple TV, Google, Amazon, and you can buy it and rent it there. And then it's supposed to have a theatrical release. My understanding is sometime in November. And so it is Winnie the Pooh Christmas with all the original characters pulled directly from A.A. Milne's books. And I really just got immersed into that whole world. A quick side note that these characters are actually the original, in my mind, the original Inside Out characters, because all of them have the different emotions. You've got Piglet with scared. You've got Tigger with happiness. You've got, Eeyore, with the sadness and depression. So they all kind of fold into that, but that's all comes from A.A. Milne coming off of, World War I, being completely depressed with PTSD, but they didn't classify PTSD at that time.
Back then.
And so he just wanted to do something for his son and get into that world. And he wrote this brilliant book, it's 2 books. And it's so cool to kind of jump back into this world.
Oh, it's going to be great. I can't wait. do have to say that whole Jeremy Hale red herring was one of the better ones so far.
I think so
That's
too.
great.
I think so
Like
too.
coming in, I thought it was him. They did a great job in setting him up. And obviously, kudos to JR for, pulling it off in terms of the performance. And
I also thought that it could be Noel's character. And I want to just quickly, before we get into that, maybe allow Jimmy to elaborate on his one word from earlier, which I believe was Ghostbusters. Is that right, Jimmy? Who are you going to call?
Yeah. Well, I thought it was interesting for many reasons because, Patrick Jane is struggling with the whole idea of anything in the outer realms,
Sure.
and that everything that is mentalism is just fake. And so I love that he was struggling with that, but yet it was the ghost that busted, Ashley's character because, you guys are in the van playing the audio back. And also it kind of busted Jane too at the end, because when she comes in for that last scene and says, your daughter never awakened, she wasn't awake for any of that stuff. And so that word really encompassed kind of the arc of going from standoff from Ghost and the joke of ghost busting to the ghost busting her, and also busting, Patrick James' emotions,
Yeah. I love that.
Nice.
I think that's a really nice summation of the episode. Follow that if you dare, Tim.
Yeah, I don't know if I can, but the first one was Versus, right? And that was just Jane versus Fry. I thought this was the perfect episode to where Jane has met his match, and that's where this came out. The word vulnerable was again a first for Jane. We got to see him in a very vulnerable position, a position that we've never seen him in to this point. So that's what this episode kind of meant for me.
Yeah, I love that. And I completely agree. The one thing that I do need to address, and it was my second word, was nausea. Now, I don't know if you remember this, but I feel like all three of us will be united in this feeling of nausea, because I know that when we shot that roundabout merry-go-round scene, you and I were both on there. I know that Taj, our Steadicam operator, he was certainly feeling it. And I can imagine that after a few go-rounds, you were probably feeling it too, Jimmy, right? Editing a scene like that, that must be one of the most nauseating, like just having to watch it go round and round and round.
This show would have never happened if we didn't have all the right people in place, And, I know you guys joke about, your bromance, but I think that's what showed. Even last night, even the episode, you saw how your characters have good chemistry together. And I know it was written for Rigsby to get with Van Pelt, but at the end of the day, you guys have this awesome bromance. It's so cool.
No, and Owen's mentioned it more than a few times about lightning in a bottle. That's what this show was, and from top to bottom.
I'm sure there must be a formula to putting together a Mentalist episode.
This was still early as we were trying to develop the show and try to listen what the studio and the network wants and everything. And you're just trying to survive. As most shows, season one, you're just trying to get to season two. And I feel like that's kind of what this show was. And then Bruno had even said early on, this is basically Sherlock Holmes Jr. And I never really thought about it, but he really is a Sherlock Holmes. That's where that mentalizing comes in. You're watching him and seeing him kind of unravel everything. Unfortunately, with this early episode, and I'd have to watch subsequent episodes, I felt like we hadn't quite established as much mentalizing yet in this episode. Yes, you see him look around. He asks if he can go upstairs, and then cut to him, yelling for Lisbon. It'd been nice if what we had done later in later seasons, that you'd follow him up the stairs. He'd be looking at the photographs, and you really hear, the performance of everybody talking downstairs while you're following him, which we started to do with this one. It was more of a cut to, let's keep with the main core group, and then, he's found something.
Is that because we weren't necessarily sold on the mentalizing aspect of the way we shoot it at this point? Because we did do that in the beginning. There was some various going through rooms and clocking things, and then we pull away from it, and then we go back to it at a certain point. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I also think it's because, David Nutter knew the show, and I'm sure there'd been a lot more, conversation there. I think this is the hard thing too, as a director for hire on these shows, is, Martha did a fantastic job, but I don't know how much information had been given, and also, we're only episode 7. So is there a discussion of like, make sure you get some coverage, B-roll of him looking at what he's other directors that had done more with us throughout the seasons. they really knew what the show was. And I think that goes back to the editing is as soon as I see those shots, oh, we better cut those in because we got to see him mentalizing.
You bring up a really interesting point there, Jimmy, which is that did you end up having a shorthand with our regular directors of like, okay, Dave Barrett wants this, Chris Long wants this, Charles Beeson wants this. And I guess you probably then over time absorb their style and know this is a Chris Long shot. Would you have a sort of a cutaway style that would be specific to a director, or would you know that they would want to end a scene in a certain way?
100%, yes. For instance, I knew what Dave Barrett wanted to focus more on the action stuff. I knew with John Showalter, because John Showalter was an editor, if he shot all the cameras and sometimes that guy covered the scene, I had to cut to every one of those cameras. He wasn't just shooting it just to have protection. He was shooting it because he wanted that energy.
There's a point.
And even sometimes if you had a static shot in post, I had to put like a little push on it and do some of these things because he wanted everything to keep moving. So after you start working with those things, you get those notes over and over again. You think, I'm just going to do them now. Later on in the seasons, he'd said, thank you so much. You've used every one of my shots. And same for, I became Simon Baker's editor. And, it was the very last episode of the season. Simon sent me such a beautiful note saying, hey, mate, I think this is the best editor's cut you've ever given me. And that's because I knew what he wanted. So you start to lock in. You have to know what the show is and you do what the show requires, but you also have to do what the director requires to kind of put those two pieces together.
That's interesting. You would have to, you would actually know that even though you didn't get it in the editing room, you would know that Barrett would want a push in on something and you would manufacture that after the fact because
he didn't get that shot. Right. Sure. Because sometimes you're moving too quickly.
But you already knew, oh, you know what? Barrett would appreciate that. So you did that in post.
Was it a challenge to have to edit for directors that you knew had been editors? You talked about John Showalter.
Yeah. When I was coming up as an assistant and I'd see John come in and he was frustrated with some of the other edits, sometimes he'd jump in, right or wrong, and do the edit himself because he knew what he wanted. And sometimes if you can't articulate it, he could just do it. So obviously, I don't want that to happen with me. For him, the edit is, 3 seconds here, 3 seconds here. It's almost like that TikTok type thing. You're just keeping this energy in these shots. Then that's what I have to do.
Were there ever times where you found yourself sort of looking at the final edit and thinking, oh, I wish I'd done that?
Yeah, but this is the nice thing about being able to do the editor's cut. So I did what I wanted when I did the editor's cut. Then you give it to the director and then they might pull that out or change it because they had something different in their head. The nice thing is I always still had mine here because when Chris and Bruno would come in the room, they're like, this isn't working. And then I could say, can I show you what I did in my editor's cut? And then, and even if that wasn't exactly right, I could show them what I had thought because it's all supposed to be collaborative. And then it's like, oh, I love that. And then sometimes it'd be, let's do a little bit what the director did, but then let's add in what you did. And so then that's how I'd kind of achieve that.
Did the process change much? We started the show, we were shooting on film. Is that right? Am I remembering that rightly?
Yes.
How much of the edit process changed for you?
Luckily I had a little bit of that when we were on Dirt with Courtney Cox because they did digital for that. Obviously the actors, don't want to be that crisp. And then you get a look and shooting on film, you have the grain and it just looks nice. It's gritty. It just feels good, and I know it's TV, but we're still doing cool things. No, it didn't affect us. We got the material in the same way. And this is very different because what we got in the Avid is what we basically broadcast from. Now, most of the time, what you do is you would shoot film. They give you a lower quality version. You edit from it. Then you send it on. They do an online edit, which they would up-res it to make it nicer. But but early on, they said, no, what goes in the Avid is what's going to come out, and they're going to color correct that. So none of that changed for us. And I actually, early on, was so freaked out about it. I told myself, I don't know if I want to come on the show. I literally told myself, I'll give myself a month, and if I can't do it, I'm out. Right. And thankfully, it was really easy. But, it was these early days of trying to learn this new way of doing it. It seemed like I didn't think it was going to work.
That's pretty great that you were there at the changeover, That's to understand what that actually meant in real time. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, I think also to be on a show that ran through so many different permeations. They don't think about those technical challenges that, at the end of the day, we just serve the episode and they assume that, you really are, Jimmy, the the unsung hero of the show, and you are sculpting the raw materials into something that ended up being the show, whether it's the director or the actor or whoever sort of takes that limelight. And I have never had the opportunity to thank you. So thank you for always making us look good.
Sure. And what I want to say also is it's not just me, it's the other editors too. You know, it was David Ekstrom, it was Christopher Sabelli, you know, it was Glenn Farr that were early on. And then it was when I was going to leave, I was actually going to leave the show in season 4 because the show was so set and working so well, there was nowhere for me to go. And so luckily to Chris and Bruno's, you know, thinking through the process, and they actually made me, you know, one of the lead editors. And so, but it's a team. It's a team. You know, nobody does these shows like this that are so successful without a good team. And
I agree. The fact that I still want to reconnect with Tim, however many years after the fact, I think is testament to the fact that we really did have lightning in a bottle and a very special group of people, both in front of and behind the camera.
There wasn't a day on set where we didn't look forward to being on set.
On set, yeah, and that's not true of every project. And I look back with a very rare and special fondness for The Mentalist, and it was in no small part due to the people.
And can I say how nice it was to see the old CBI building and see those exteriors downtown? I mean, it's just what a cool set. I mean, it really was a cool set.
It makes me laugh when I tell my daughters, "Oh, Daddy pulled a dead body out of there." But obviously, within the context of The Mentalist, I can't ever drive past that bridge that goes to Pasadena without thinking, "We pulled a few bodies out of there." You know, and over 150 something episodes, your locale, you know, becomes slightly exhausted. Tim, was there anything else that you wanted to touch on in the episode?
I did want to make the note that this is the first time the Jane's Citron makes an appearance.
Yeah, that's right. Comes right up.
Did the Citron actually work? I don't recall whether it actually drove or not.
I think there was more than one too. I think.
Can I also say that Trim Tim looking great, Tim? Like you were Trim Tim before you became Rambo Tim. Like you know, that was early days before you bulked up to like Superman. So.
No, I think watching it, I was like, wow, I must have been like 120 pounds in that episode. Yeah.
And 100 of it just in the guns, you know?
and that's also early days. Like literally, you could be watching The Mentalist, then a commercial for AT&T come on. Tim would be on that. Then I'd be driving home. I fill up at a Shell gas station. Tim would pop up
everywhere.
Shell. I'm like, oh my God, this guy's everywhere.
Omnipresent. We talked about shooting the pilot, and Tim basically explained how he would go from shooting The Mentalist down to Texas to shoot commercials. Basically, just there wasn't a minute in the day where he wasn't working. And I said,
But to that, Amanda also going to Texas to shoot Friday the 13th.
She was. Right? In fact, I was the only person not going to Texas to shoot something. But I agree with you, Jimmy. Tim was omnipresent. Did you find in the edit room that you became aware of how tight Tim's shirts were?
I mean, listen.
Like this, for example, would never fly with Tim. This would be, you know,
that's
this wizard sleeve.
No, that's too loose. That's too loose.
But that, you know, maybe if we just, there we go. It's just perfect, you know. Was there short sleeves in this episode?
I think so, yeah. Oh, no. It was rolled up.
Rolled up. Okay.
Yeah. This is how editors save actors. There was an episode where I think it was myself, Amanda, and Tim were staking someone out. We're on the back lot. And I dive behind a car, and then I do this heroic dive into a bunch of trash bags as I'm shooting. Now, in my mind, it is the most breathtaking action sequence you've ever seen. I watch it back in the monitor, and it is the most clumsy, awful collapse into a pile of bin bags you've ever seen. I barely get the shot, and I'm just like, now, when it was cut together, it looked amazing. So I was like, you and your esteemed colleagues, Jimmy, thank you, because I cannot tell you, had that landed the way it was, oof, yeah, not good.
But that is sound effects really do it well. You know, some sound effects with a... You know, that all makes it real.
When in doubt, just flood it with sound. Have you ever had any experiences with real life mentalists or psychics?
I have, and you both may or may not remember this, but remember our season 1 wrap party. We had it in the basement at some place, and they had hired a mentalist. Do you remember any of this?
Oh, vaguely, yeah.
I remember the hiring of the mentalist, but I don't remember the events that occurred.
The mentalist wanted to know if there was this group of people that would be mentalized, I guess. They wanted to hypnotize you and then show their mentalist powers. And so I thought, I'm a game player. I'm going to jump in and I'll be part of it. And I think there was a few others. And he was hypnotizing people, and I was not hypnotized. And the person next to me also was not hypnotized. And they just said, "I'm sorry, I can't do this." And they just stood up and left. Now, being a showman and understanding it's all a show for everyone, I acted like I was hypnotized. And then he said, "And now you're going to lick ice cream." And then I was like, just playing along.
Sure.
Obviously, he's there to do a show. And
Sure.
now, how terrible is it for him to fail completely? That does no
You're a
good
good
at anyone.
sport.
We're all
Oh, man.
So I put on a show for this mentalist.
I had exactly the same experience at university. It was a freshman event, and one of the entertainment things was a mentalist or a psychic or whatever. And he did some hypnotism and pretended to. Now, I wasn't such a good sport. I saw these people doing ridiculous things around me, and I just went, "I'm not hypnotized, guys. It's just not working for me."
Right.
But the fact that I
Sure.
don't have a great recollection of that party at the end of season 1 makes me worried that maybe I was hypnotized. Now, Tim doesn't recall
Forget.
anything either, so maybe we were just two perfect marks. And this whole time I've been saying, I've never been hypnotized. What's your sort of feeling about the whole psychic thing whilst we're on the subject with the episode?
And I always have an open mind to all of
Yeah.
that, and I never like to shut down anyone. But personally, I can't say I don't believe in it just because I haven't experienced it. Like if
Right.
something that happened to me that I couldn't explain, then I could say like, "Oh yeah, maybe I do," but it just hasn't happened. So again, I can't discredit it at all. It just hasn't happened to me where I can go in that direction.
I didn't believe in psychics until last week when I pulled off one of the greatest psychic feats of all time and guessed Tim's card just cold. Although looking back on it, I do think that he did a touch of what you did with the mentalist and just gave it to me.
No, you
Because-
nailed it. No,
Well,
you nailed it.
I don't know. You say that, but you're a good friend. I appreciate it. I appreciate that. Have you? I can't remember if we talked about your take on psychics, Tim. Have you had any psychic run-ins?
No, and I'm with you guys. I don't. It's never been something that I've believed in.
I've
very
always,
much
I've
in that
always
camp.
wanted to be able to have that, but I do think that, to Simon's credit, that was one thing that he was wonderful at in the role.
So
was
good.
that
The showmanship.
persuasiveness. And whether it was done through showmanship, through humor, through connection. And I think we saw all of those tricks in today's episode. This was the first time that we really saw Jane moved.
It's just nice to see a new evolution and seeing the rest of the cast kind of really folding in and starting to become one. And everybody's so likable, and most of the time I'm watching these episodes 20 times, and
Sure.
and if I'm still loving the show after watching it 20 times, that's a testament to your acting, to the writing, to everything. And it just was a really nice arc. It's a great guest casting. And, I also learned a little movie magic too. I know you don't like to break the disbelief, but when they were pulling that car out of the water, the tech special effects team had used foam to hold in the water in the door. So when they did that, open the door and the water flowed out, like it was hidden that there's foam in there to hold that water in. And I was like, oh, so cool. Like I learned more about that and like what to focus in on the edit.
I do think a big part of our show was the fact that we loved making it. I know that sounds trite, but we really did. And just hearing the stories that you're telling me, the pride that's gone into the work, not just people pleasing, but also just your own pride in that, and to be able to say, here's the episode served up. This, because as you say, now that television has shifted, there are very rare and perhaps maybe no more opportunities to tell stories over 7 or 8 seasons. Everything is streamed. It's instant gratification. We were part of a bygone TV era where it was week over week, a slow burn. And I loved that.
Right.
I miss that a little bit. I love binging a show on streamers, but I also love the fact I had to wait for it,
When I was on Dirt in those early days before streaming, the shows, as soon as they aired, then they would put them up on iTunes. And remember, you could pay $2.99 or whatever it is and buy them on iTunes. So there was another outlet for that. But this show, they didn't want to do that at all. And so you just had to sit there and you had to tune in at the time and watch it. And if you didn't watch it, you missed it. And there were still reruns during that time. So you might be lucky to catch an episode during reruns during the summer. But other than that, you had to TiVo it. And then our show became #1 of all TiVoed shows, because if you couldn't watch it live, you're TiVoing it. And there's no other outlet to get it. So, I think it was really cool that for this show, you just, you couldn't watch season 1 until season 2 started, and then they came out with the box set of season 1. But other than that, there was no other way to watch these shows.
TiVo is just such a takes me back to I remember doing shows and it was like, how are our TiVo numbers? Were they okay? You know, and of course no one talks about TiVo anymore.
When I first started editing in season 3, one of Dave Barrett's episodes, you know, that was a prideful moment because I was entrusted to kind of take over. Also doing Simon's, you know, first episode, Red Moon.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. And so, you know, co-editing that with Chris Sabelli. And the cool thing, which we'll get into, but with the Simon Baker episodes, why I was placed as Simon's editor. There's a lot of homework that Simon would give me to watch things like, for instance, with Red Moon, watch Straw Dogs, and let's get into the mindset of the characters so that the editing takes place with that. And each of his episodes got to be their own kind of outside of the Mentalist norm. They could be a little more movie-like, and that was really cool. So
did
those
Simon
are
like
the
to work?
moments.
Did Simon often give you sort of visual references like that when you guys worked?
Oh, so many times. Yeah, beforehand we'd sit down. You know, I'd have that homework to do, which I never had with any other director. So it was really cool because he wanted to show his best, but also he wanted me to show my best, and so it was great. And then obviously, as we're growing as a family, Robin Tunney and I became fairly close, and she had me do during the pandemic a whole pilot for her over Zoom, which was awesome. And I was recording with 11 cameras over Zoom and doing that. Tim and I have become very close. You know, he acted in my short film and, you know, with Mikey Madison and with Kira O'Donnell,
Gillen.
which I believe you
Kira
worked
O'Donnell.
with.
And
in American
Gillen,
Sniper. And Karen Gillen. And so, you know, it becomes nice because then we all support each other outside the Mentalist. And this is how the film industry should work. You know, we help each other on the show we're on, but we help each other outside, and you don't forget each other. And sure, time has passed, and a few of the relationships start to fade, but then here we are again. We're back to this is great, you know. So
with these long hours, you don't want to be working with people that you don't enjoy working with. It's very simple, and you know, and at the end of the day, you want those personalities to all be on the same playing field, right?
Yeah, and to see everybody grow and change too. I mean, Nina on season 2 of Dirt had come on as Chris's assistant and then came over here. And Nina has just skyrocketed. And going back to The Last of Us, Nina directed one of those episodes, you know, and it's so cool to see her trajectory. I'm so lucky. I can't tell you.
This has been such a treat. And again, part of the TV Police really for us has been about trying to lift the veil on the processes that people maybe are not party to. And thank you for this, Jimmy. We hope you'll come back. And the people of Guatemala are going to be loving hearing from Jimmy Gadd. And not to forget our dear friends in Uzbekistan as well. Make sure that you join us next week for episode 8, where we will be having the pleasure of Ken Woodruff's company.
Yes.
So for his first episode.
Thin Red Line, episode 8.
Until the next time, thank you so much. And thank you, Jimmy. And thank you, Tim Kang. And thank you for listening at home. And we will join you next week at the TV Police.
Let's go.